hello, friend, and welcome to day 29 of our 31-day journey through the Proverbs. Can you believe it? We're almost at the end of our series. Well, here's the thing about reading through the Proverbs. There's a lot of them. So don't worry if not all of them make sense. If you read through the Proverbs or a chapter of the Proverbs and only one verse stands out to you, that's fine. It's kind of like decisions or options or choices. It's like the fewer you have, the easier it is, really. If you have a lot of choices, sometimes it can be overwhelming. So don't be overwhelmed by all the verses. Just pick one that really resonates with you and focus on that one for the day. So let's go ahead and get started with our reading for today, shall we? Reading Proverbs chapter 29, and starting in verse 1, it says, "He who is often rebuked and stiffens his neck will be destroyed suddenly with no remedy. When the righteous thrive, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people groan. Whoever loves wisdom brings joy to his father, but a companion of prostitutes squanders his wealth. The king, by justice, makes the land stable, but he who takes bribes tears it down. A man who flatters his neighbor spreads a net for his feet. An evil man is snared by his sin, but the righteous can sing and be glad. The righteous care about justice for the poor. The wicked aren't concerned about knowledge. Mockers stir up a city, but wise men turn away anger. If a wise man goes to court with a foolish man, the fool rages or scoffs, and there is no peace. The bloodthirsty hate a man of integrity, and they seek the life of the upright. A fool vents all of his anger, but a wise man brings himself under control. If a ruler listens to lies, all of his officials are wicked. The poor man and the oppressor have this in common: the Lord gives sight to the eyes of both. The king who fairly judges the poor, his throne will be established forever. The rod of correction gives wisdom, but a child left to himself causes shame to his mother. When the wicked increase, sin increases, but the righteous will see their downfall. Correct your son, and he will give you peace. Yes, he will bring delight to your soul. Where there is no revelation, the people cast off restraint, but one who keeps the law is blessed. A servant can't be corrected by words. Though he understands, yet he will not respond. Do you see a man who is hasty in his words? There is more hope for a fool than for him. He who pampers his servant from youth will have him become a son in the end. An angry man stirs up strife, and a wrathful man abounds in sin. A man's pride brings him low, but one of lowly spirit gains honor. Whoever is an accomplice of a thief is an enemy of his own soul. He takes an oath, but dares not testify. The fear of man proves to be a snare, but whoever puts his trust in the Lord is kept safe. Many seek the ruler's favor, but a man's justice comes from the Lord. A dishonest man detests the righteous, and the upright in their ways detest the wicked. Thus endeth chapter 29. Fin de chapitre 29. It's French. I don't speak a whole lot of French, but I understand that. There's a verse in this chapter that I just want to touch on real briefly. It's not my focus verse or my takeaway verse, but it's this verse, verse 18, where it says, "There is no revelation, or where there is no revelation, the people cast off restraint, but one who keeps the law is blessed." Now, I bring this one up just simply because you may have heard at some point in your life this saying that goes, "Where there are no dreams, the people die." Or similarly, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." Where there is no vision, the people perish. Now, that sounds like a really nice, sweet, motivational phrase. Where there's no vision. We need vision, man. And that's true. We do need vision. And if without vision and without our dreams, if we don't go after them, our dreams die and then we die a little bit inside. And I wholeheartedly support that notion. The problem is that phrase actually comes from this verse. They'll say, "Oh yeah, that's in the Bible." Well, technically, it is in a Bible. That verse, or that saying, "Where there is no vision, the people perish," that's actually from the King James Version of this verse. Now, how many times do we look to or quote the King James Version of the Bible as the definitive and authoritative interpretation of the Scriptures? Not ever that I can think of, to be quite honest with you. Usually it's the other way around. If somebody's reading the King James, it's like, what in the world does that mean? Let's look at another another translation so we can figure out what it means. And so this, what that verse actually is intended to mean is where there is no revelation. Or let's do this. Let's look to the New Living Translation. That's always, I think, gives a unique perspective. The New Living Translation version of this verse is, "When people do not accept divine guidance, they run wild. But whoever obeys the law is joyful." That's a much different interpretation. And the only reason I bring it up is because it just is interesting to me how many times I've heard people quote half of a verse from the Bible. And if you say it's from the Bible, suddenly you have all this authority on your side. And oftentimes it's a complete misinterpretation of the Scriptures. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there. That was a freebie. Let's go ahead and turn that one off, and we're going to bring up the focus verse, the one that I really want to focus on today, and that's verse 13, which says, "The poor man and the oppressor have this in common. The Lord gives sight to the eyes of both." Okay, now, what I find really interesting about this verse is that yes, there is an interpretation of this verse that kind of goes along the lines that, God is the creator of sight. God gives everybody sight. And so therefore, God sees, since he is the author of sight, he sees everything. He sees what the poor man is going through. He sees what the oppressor is doing to the poor man, and he's going to act on behalf of both. Now, I kind of have a problem with that version of it, because what it's saying is that God doesn't have any mercy on the oppressor. He's not going to work with the oppressor and try to get him to see the error of his way. Conversely, we tend to want to sympathize with the poor man in this particular verse. And so another way of looking at it, and one that I find much more interesting, is if you look at it from the sense of both the poor man and the oppressor can see what's going on. They both have understanding. The Lord has given that capacity of insight to both the poor man and the oppressor. Both of them are to blame here. Both of them have a problem. The poor man might not be poor simply because he's being oppressed. Now, certainly there's times where that happens, but there may be he may be partly to blame for where he's at. And so if you look at it where, both of them are kind of in a dance together, they're both a willing party. If the poor man doesn't stand up to his oppressor, then he's just as much to blame as the person who's doing the oppressor. He's actually enabling this person's sin, so to speak. And, of course, I thought about, well, what about African American slaves? Am I saying that they were just as guilty as the white man? No way am I saying that. There's some things are just heinous crimes, right? But what I think this verse is saying is that they were all created equal in God's eyes, in God's sight. We all have the same opportunity in the sense that we can always change our situation. It may be easier for others. I will tell you this, it is difficult for an oppressor to change his situation. Who wants to give up that, false sense of power? But I think what's interesting here is that just poverty does not equal powerlessness, I think is what I'm getting out of this. God gives the oppressor the sight and understanding to see the folly of his way. Likewise, God gives the poor man the sight and understanding to see how he can advocate for himself, fight for his rights, and stand up to injustice. So I think that's a much more interesting, much more powerful way of interpreting this verse. And I think poverty is often the result of a mindset or a perspective or how you see things. So I think it's really powerful to give everybody empowerment through this verse. And so my affirmation that I take away from this is, I take responsibility for the results in my life, or I am responsible for the results in my life is another way of looking at that. So that's my takeaway. That's my affirmation. Hey, enough of, about me. You've heard enough from me. Let's go ahead and take a look at my guest response. Now, this is from somebody we've heard from before. This is from Roland, again, from Pasco, Washington. He's had a lot to say. I love having him on this series. I'm super grateful for him chiming in and being a part of this. He's focusing on verse 11, which says, "A fool vents all of his anger, but a wise man brings himself under control." And this is what he has to say about it. Verse 11 is a very simple and profound verse. I am reminded of a teaching I received from Jack Canfield's Success Principles, which is E plus R equals O, or event plus response equals outcome. The events in your life that you can't do anything about, plus your response to those events, yields your outcome. You cannot control what comes from another's mind or mouth, only how you respond to it. It is your choice to be a victim or a survivor. Such great wisdom from thousands of years ago that applies so well for today. Amen to that, Roland. Thank you for sharing that. And Roland's affirmation for us is just mind-blowing. I love this affirmation. He says, I control how I respond to things that I have no control over. I love that. I control how I respond to things that I have no control over. Man, I just want to simmer on that one for a while. It's so powerful. Roland, thank you so much for chiming in, for sharing your unique perspective and affirmation with the rest of the community. So grateful for that. And I'm so grateful for you, those of you that are watching, listening, and especially for those of you who have been commenting on these videos. So grateful for your interaction. So grateful for what you're sharing with the rest of the community. I want to invite you to continue to keep that up, and so grateful you could join us today, and look forward to seeing you again tomorrow for day 30 of our journey through the Proverbs. Take care and have a blessed rest of your day.